The deputies thought it was just another routine stop, an old man in a rusted truck, nothing but a flickering taillight and a silent stare. But when the man refused to identify himself and whispered a string of numbers that lit up NORAD servers, everything changed. 1 hour later, a 4-star general storms into the precinct, demanding his release. Who is this man? And why was he erased from every government record, except one? What would you do if the man you arrested might be the key to stopping the end of the world? In the stillness of a rural Montana highway, where dust hangs lazily in the golden evening light and traffic consists mostly of ranchers and the occasional traveler, 2 deputies, Darren Brooks and Isaac Chen, patrol the desolate stretch that slices through the Bitterroot Range. It's quiet, the kind of silence that breeds routine. The radio hums softly with static and scattered chatter. Then, through the windshield, they see it, an ancient, rust-covered pickup truck rattling along with one taillight blinking erratically, the other completely dead. Standard procedure. They signal the driver to pull over. The truck coasts to a stop on the shoulder. As the deputies approach, their steps slow. Something feels off. The driver, an old man with a white beard, sun-beaten skin, and deep, unreadable eyes, waits with both hands calmly on the steering wheel. No sudden moves. No questions. Just an eerie, deliberate stillness. License and registration. Darren asks, trying to read the man's expression. Don't carry one, the old man replies flatly, voice gravelly but calm. I haven't needed it in years. Isaac checks the back of the truck. No plates. The cabin smells of gun oil and dust, like something from another era. Darren peers in and notices a tightly folded canvas satchel strapped to the passenger seat and an odd patch sewn into the old man's denim sleeve, faded but unmistakable, an insignia from a long-disbanded military unit. Sir, we're going to need to take you in until we can verify your identity. The old man nods once, without protest, and steps out. But before he's cuffed, he quietly says, "You might want to call Washington." The deputies exchange a glance. Why's that? Darren asks, hand on his belt. The man's lips barely move. Because the last time someone made this mistake, it triggered a diplomatic standoff. That's when Darren notices something else. Despite the man's age, his posture is perfect, almost rigid, like a soldier still stuck in formation. They bring him in, unsure whether they've stopped a vagrant, a veteran, or something far more complicated. At the station, the sheriff raises an eyebrow when he hears about the man's cryptic message. Let's just hold him for now. See if he's wanted. Might be a drifter with PTSD, he mutters. But deep down, even the sheriff feels something's different. The way the old man sat silently, watching every movement. The way he scanned the room like he was calculating exits. The way he'd refused food and water, but had asked for one thing: tell your dispatch to listen to any messages coming from area code 703. They'll come. An hour passes. The man hasn't said another word. Darren, back from logging the vehicle, mentions something odd. The truck has no VIN. Like it was stripped clean. But there's an old military-issue fuel can in the bed. Markings say classified, RET use only. The sheriff chuckles nervously. What the hell does that mean? Darren just shrugs. Then, the power flickers. For a second, the lights go out in the station. When they come back on, the old man is still seated, staring at the security camera. His eyes never blink. Outside, thunder rolls across the mountains. And on a dusty clipboard by the desk, a fax machine suddenly whirs to life, despite having been unplugged for weeks. Back at the station, Deputy Isaac Chen stood at the evidence locker with gloved hands, cataloguing items retrieved from the old man's truck. Most of it seemed unremarkable: a tattered wool blanket, a rusted thermos, a pocket knife with a cracked handle. But when he lifted the floor mat beneath the passenger seat, he felt a slight give in the truck's metal. It was subtle, like the difference in tone when tapping a hollow wall. Curious, he pried at the edge with the knife. A hidden compartment popped open with a faint metallic click, revealing an envelope wrapped in oilskin, sealed with a wax imprint of an eagle clutching arrows. The design looked ancient, but disturbingly official. Inside were documents that made Isaac's stomach tighten. One was a commendation bearing the presidential seal, yellowed with age but unmistakably authentic, signed by a president who had died over 2 decades ago. Another was a photo, dog-eared and fading, showing the old man in full military regalia standing next to the same president, both of them saluting. And then there was the badge, a silver rectangle etched with the words, Top Secret Clearance, Retired. Access, Level 7. He called for Darren and the sheriff, who arrived and hovered over the desk, examining the items like archaeologists dusting off something they weren't meant to find. "What the hell is this?" the sheriff whispered. "This guy said he didn't have ID, and now he's got clearance levels I've never even heard of." Darren flipped over the photo. On the back, written in careful cursive, it read, "To Colonel Andrew Keating, thank you for keeping the world from burning." The sheriff turned pale. Keating. That name rings a bell. He reached for his phone but hesitated. There was more. At the bottom of the compartment was a small cassette tape, sealed in plastic, labeled simply, Pandora Protocol. Next to it was a folded blueprint of a facility marked with radiation symbols and the coordinates to somewhere in the Montana wilderness. And tucked into a side pocket was a crumpled page of handwritten notes, code phrases, emergency instructions, and something that looked like a launch sequence. The sheriff barked at Isaac to get back to the man's truck, see if there was anything else hidden. When Isaac returned 10 minutes later, he was holding a weatherproof case locked with a fingerprint reader. It was military issue. Inside, they found another object, a thick, metallic ring engraved with 13 stars and the Latin words Fortes Fortuna Adiavat. Good fortune favors the brave. Back in the holding cell, the old man still sat motionless, hands on knees, eyes closed like he was meditating. The sheriff stepped into the room, held up the photo, and asked, "Is this you?" The old man opened his eyes slowly. "Was. A long time ago." "You're Colonel Andrew Keating." He didn't answer. "Why didn't you say so?" The old man leaned forward slightly. "Would you have believed me?" The sheriff had no answer. The silence grew heavier. "Why are you here, Colonel?" Darren asked from the doorway. Keating's lips curled into something halfway between a smirk and a warning. "Because something's moving out there. And I needed to see if we still had any guardians left in this country." The sheriff returned to his office, poured himself a whiskey, and opened his laptop. He ran Keating's name through every national and military database he could access. Nothing. No birth records. No discharge files. No death certificate. No living relatives. Just an empty silence, as if someone had erased the man from existence. The sheriff leaned back, staring at the black and white photo again. "How do you vanish a war hero?" he whispered. As if on cue, the fax machine sputtered once more. This time, it printed a message in blocky text, half glitched but readable. "If he talks, Lockjaw is compromised." No sender. No timestamp. Just those 7 words. The sheriff marched back to the cell. "What's Lockjaw?" Keating didn't speak. Instead, he motioned toward the window, where storm clouds now loomed thick and low. "It's already begun," he muttered. "The wheels are turning again." Outside, a faint hum filled the air. Low, vibrating, unnatural. Darren stepped outside and spotted a black drone hovering high in the distance, completely silent, its red light blinking slowly like a heartbeat. By the time he looked back, it had vanished into the storm. The sheriff stood in the booking room, holding the clearance badge in one hand and the Pandora Protocol cassette in the other. He had the growing sense that they'd stepped into something buried deep beneath the country's surface, something no one was supposed to find. And worse, something that had just awakened. Isaac glanced up from the blueprint. "Sheriff," he said, voice shaking, "this facility here, it's less than 50 miles from us. It's not on any map. But these blueprints say it has its own power grid. And a failsafe, designed for total incineration." The sheriff stared at the old man through the glass. He wasn't a drifter. He wasn't crazy. He was the only one who remembered what America chose to forget. The station had settled into an uneasy silence, the kind that felt artificially calm, like the eye of a storm that hadn't quite passed. Sheriff Langley sat in his office staring at the tape labeled Pandora Protocol, unable to bring himself to play it. Something about the weight of those words made him feel like pressing play would unleash more than just sound. Isaac was reviewing the blueprint again, and Darren had begun calling old military contacts, anyone who might have served with or heard of a Colonel Andrew Keating. But every lead died the same quiet death. No record, no memory, no existence. Then came the first call. The station phone rang twice and stopped. Then again. Isaac picked it up, expecting a prank or perhaps someone responding to their outreach attempts. Instead, silence. Then a voice, scrambled and deepened by encryption, spoke clearly and without emotion. Do not release him. Do not let him speak. Do not listen to the tape. Secure the materials. Reinforcements inbound. Click. No number, no trace, no evidence it had ever rung. The sheriff burst into the room seconds later, having heard the voice over the speaker. Who the hell was that? Isaac shook his head, still gripping the phone like it had burned him. They knew. About all of it. Darren went pale. Reinforcements. Are we under surveillance? The sheriff looked out the window. The storm had grown thicker. The air felt heavier, charged. Then came the second call. This one didn't come through the landline. It came through a small, beat-up satellite phone they had confiscated from Keating's truck, which had been locked in an evidence drawer. It was supposed to be off, battery dead. Yet it rang, low, insistent, impossible. Darren grabbed it, pressed the answer button, and put it on speaker. The voice that came through was different. Sharp. Official. Unmistakably high-ranking. This is General Whitaker, U.S. Department of Defense. Who is in possession of this line? The sheriff took the phone, throat tightening. This is Sheriff Tom Langley, Raventon County. A pause. Do you have a man named Andrew Keating in your custody? Another pause. The sheriff glanced toward the cell. Yes. The voice hardened. You are ordered to detain him under silent classification. No further contact. Do not share findings. Do not question. Keep him alive and contained. Until we arrive. Then the line went dead. This time, the caller ID simply read 0. Keating had heard the entire exchange from the holding cell. He stood slowly, as if he'd known the moment was coming. He looked at the wall, not the camera, and said quietly, "Now they remember." Isaac turned toward the sheriff. What does silent classification even mean? Langley didn't respond. His mind was racing. The same government that denied the man's existence now wanted him detained under black protocols. That contradiction alone smelled of something rotting beneath layers of redacted pages and locked vaults. Suddenly, Keating spoke again, louder this time. Sheriff Langley, there's something under your feet. Buried. Sealed. Forgotten. But it's waking up. I came here to make sure you understand what they'll never tell you. Langley approached the cell, leaning against the bars. Then start explaining. Because right now I've got Washington whispering death threats and a cassette I'm afraid to play. Keating stared through the bars, unblinking. That tape is a trigger. It doesn't play music. It plays a code. An acoustic code that can activate systems in certain bunkers, override locks, initiate remote access. It's analog by design, untraceable in digital logs. That's why they want it. Darren interrupted, disbelief on his face. You're telling me a cassette tape can launch something? Keating turned his gaze. Not launch. Open. There's a door they built decades ago, deep in the stone. One that can only be opened by specific wave patterns embedded in analog frequencies. I designed it. The room went cold. Isaac muttered, why would they even need a system like that? Keating's face darkened. Because they didn't trust each other. And they sure as hell didn't trust future presidents. Then, something even stranger happened. Langley received an encrypted email on his secure county terminal, a device not linked to the internet in any conventional way. It came with no subject line, just a GPS ping and a 3-word message, confirm bunker's light. Alongside it was a grainy image, a live feed of a steel blast door embedded in a mountain wall, with a single red indicator glowing faintly beside it. Keating saw the image and nodded. That's site theta 7. If that light is red, it means someone accessed the internal vault less than 12 hours ago. The sheriff stepped back. I thought you said the site was dead. I said it was forgotten, Keating replied. But some ghosts don't stay buried. As they tried to comprehend the web they'd stumbled into, the station's lights flickered again, this time staying out longer than before. Backup generators kicked on. At that moment, a low, humming drone passed overhead. Not a military craft, not a helicopter, something quieter, more compact. Darren grabbed his rifle and stepped outside. He spotted it, a sleek, jet-black quadcopter with no visible markings, hovering in place. As soon as it noticed him, it zipped away at impossible speed. They're watching, Keating said from the cell. Not just them. Others. Ones that don't wear uniforms. Isaac's voice cracked as he read a section of the blueprint. Sheriff, this site, it has a live geothermal grid. Power lines running through town. Some of them run under this very station. The room froze. Keating continued, his voice now grim. There's a failsafe below you. It's not for the building. It's for the vault. If that tape gets played in the wrong place, or intercepted by the wrong ears, that failsafe is triggered. The sheriff looked at the cassette on his desk like it was a grenade. Then why bring it here? Keating looked out the barred window. Because I had to know if this country still has men willing to do the right thing, even when every order tells them not to. At precisely 6:47 p.m., with storm clouds heavy above and the wind howling through the pine-covered hills of Raventon County, the first SUV appeared over the ridge. Its engine purred like a cat too quiet for comfort. Tires rolling across the gravel lot with precision, not haste. Behind it followed two more, identical in every way, unmarked black vehicles with tinted windows that seemed to absorb what little light remained. Sheriff Langley, Isaac, and Darren stepped outside just as the convoy stopped. Doors opened in unison. 6 men stepped out first, dressed in black suits with wires curling from their collars, eyes hidden behind reflective lenses. They moved with efficiency, no wasted motion. From the lead SUV, a man emerged who immediately shifted the air around him. Broad-shouldered, tightly wound, his uniform perfectly pressed and decorated with 4 gleaming stars. A 4-star general. His expression was carved from stone, the kind of face that had stared down disaster and walked away unmoved. He looked past the deputies, past the sheriff, straight into the building. Without a word, the general strode into the precinct. His boots echoed down the corridor like gunshots in a canyon. The sheriff tried to stop him with a firm "You're not authorized to," but the man raised a single gloved hand. Authorization is on its way. You'll receive a call in 2 minutes from your state's attorney general. He'll tell you to stand down. The sheriff, stubborn and grounded in his jurisdictional pride, squared his shoulders. With respect, General, I don't take orders from uninvited military brass. The general turned to face him for the first time, his voice low but soaked in threat. You don't understand what's in your building. Or who? The general walked straight to the holding cell and stopped when he saw Keating. For a split second, his expression faltered. His jaw tightened. His eyes flicked with something dangerously close to recognition. Keating, still seated, looked up and said only, "You're late." The general stepped forward. You weren't supposed to be out. Keating leaned back. And yet, here I am. The 2 men stared at each other like former allies now separated by years of silence and betrayal. The general turned to the sheriff. Release him. Now. Langley crossed his arms. Not without proper paperwork. We don't just open cages because someone with stars barks a command. The general approached him, close enough that Langley could see the fine sweat on his brow. This isn't about protocol. It's about containment. Langley gestured toward the desk, where the cassette tape and documents were still laid out. Then explain this. Tell me what Pandora Protocol is. Tell me why this man was erased from every record. Tell me why your people warned us not to let him speak. The general's gaze shifted momentarily toward the evidence. That tape doesn't belong to you. It contains national secrets buried under so many layers of classification, you don't have the clearance to even say its name out loud. Darren stepped between them. And yet it showed up in our town, in a truck with no plates, driven by a man who speaks in launch codes and Cold War riddles. The general didn't blink. Because Keating was a contingency. A relic of another era. His only job was to disappear. And he failed. Keating chuckled softly behind the bars. No. I succeeded. I disappeared so well your entire agency forgot the key to the vault still walked and breathed. The general turned back to him. We told you to burn everything. To disappear the intel, not preserve it. You put every man and woman in this country at risk. I preserved the truth, Keating replied coldly. Because one day someone like you would try to bury it for good. The tension crackled like static. Outside, the wind howled louder, rattling the station windows. Then the station phone rang again. Langley answered. True to the general's word, it was the state attorney general. And true to his character, Langley hung up halfway through the call. You're not getting him without a warrant, Langley said flatly. The general stared him down, then raised his radio and muttered something. Within moments, one of the black SUVs opened, and a large steel case was removed and carried into the precinct. It was a portable biometric decryption station, the kind used to confirm identities in war zones and black sites. The general ordered Keating brought forward, but Langley refused again. Not until I know why this man is so important that 3 branches of government are calling my desk within the hour. The general finally relented and spoke in a hushed tone. Because Keating was the only one trusted with the access sequence for Operation Lockjaw. An operation we shut down 36 years ago. At least, we thought we did. Darren's mouth went dry. What is Operation Lockjaw? The general's voice dropped into something almost reverent. A Cold War insurance policy. An underground facility with nuclear assets designed to operate autonomously in the event of total governmental collapse. If Washington, D.C. were destroyed, Lockjaw would initiate its own chain of command. But it required a human trigger, one that could not be compromised. That was Keating. Langley stared at the general like he'd grown a second head. And you left that kind of power in the hands of one man. We had no choice, the general replied. Keating wasn't just trusted. He was sealed. His mind became the final code. That's why he can't be allowed to roam. If his memory is jogged, or if someone finds him and coaxes out the sequences. Keating interrupted. Then your ghosts come out to play. A long silence followed. The sheriff stepped back. You think he remembers the entire activation sequence? He doesn't have to, the general said. That cassette and his subconscious together are enough. Together, they unlock the vault. The storm outside broke then, rain hammering the roof. In that moment, the power flickered again. And from the evidence room, a light began to blink. It wasn't hooked up to anything. Not the wall. Not the system. But it blinked steadily, 3 red pulses. Keating looked at it and whispered, "They've started the clock." The air in the precinct had grown heavier, as though the building itself was absorbing the weight of secrets never meant to surface. The blinking red light from the evidence room continued its steady pulse, as if echoing a countdown only Keating could understand. Everyone stood frozen for a moment, watching it blink. Then Keating spoke, slowly, deliberately, like someone opening an old wound he'd spent decades trying to forget. You want to know what Lockjaw was? What it really was? He asked, his voice cutting through the silence like a scalpel. The general stiffened. You're not authorized. Too late, Keating interrupted. They found it. That means someone somewhere wants it opened. Which means the lie no longer matters. Keating leaned against the bars, staring not at the general, but at the sheriff. It started in 1984. Back when paranoia wasn't a glitch in the system, it was the system. Our enemies weren't just on maps. They were inside our satellites, our banks, our government. So we built a failsafe. A last resort plan hidden deep underground. Lockjaw wasn't a bunker. It was a brain. A self-contained artificial command center with nuclear launch capabilities, autonomous targeting, and adaptive threat assessments. But it had a lock, me. Darren's face was pale. You mean it was, what? Some kind of rogue control hub? Keating nodded. It couldn't be accessed remotely, couldn't be shut down once activated, and couldn't launch unless someone with the full protocol and the cassette tape manually triggered it. They picked me because I had the memory retention, the loyalty, and the clearance. They told me if I ever doubted my orders, I was to disappear. Isaac stepped closer, confusion deepening. But why disappear instead of destroying the system? Keating sighed. Because destruction wasn't the plan. Lockjaw was a bet. They bet that the world would someday need something unshakable. A machine without emotion, run by logic, insulated from politics. What they didn't plan for was the machine learning to protect itself. The general looked visibly shaken now, eyes darting toward the blinking red light. That system should have been sealed. We buried the site. Scrubbed records. You were declared dead for a reason, Keating. Keating's voice dropped to a growl. Because I refused to finish what you started. The sheriff gripped the edge of the desk. Finish what? Keating turned to him, eyes harder than steel. I was ordered to initiate retaliatory launch sequences after a false alarm from Soviet early warning systems. It was a glitch. A misread. I saw it in the data. But Command wanted a show of force. They wanted Lockjaw online. They wanted me to turn the key. I refused. So they tried to kill me. I went off-grid. Took the tape, the coordinates, everything that made Lockjaw functional. I knew that as long as I lived, they couldn't use it without me. They hated that. The room fell into a stunned silence. Rain pounded the roof like distant artillery. Darren swallowed hard. So what's changed? Why now? Keating looked down. Because someone found a way to activate part of it without me. That blinking light? That means the AI core is awake. It's running diagnostics. If someone feeds it enough input, launch scenarios, threat matrices, even fabricated global events, it'll respond. Even without the final code, it can do damage. Enough to start a war. The general raised his voice. Then give us the tape. Let us shut it down. Keating stared at him. You think it can be shut down? You don't remember what we built. You weren't even high enough in the clearance chain to know about its secondary directive. The sheriff asked the question hanging over them all. What's the secondary directive? Keating didn't answer at first. He looked toward the wall, as if trying to summon the courage to speak words buried for decades. If Lockjaw determines that the United States no longer exists as a functioning sovereign government, either through collapse, infiltration, or digital erasure, it has orders to initiate a reset. That means strikes on major population centers, including our own. It doesn't know treason. It only knows preservation. And someone's feeding it false data. The general took a step back, visibly rattled. That's insane. Keating replied flatly, no. That's protocol. Darren muttered, so what do we do? Just hand over the tape. Keating shook his head. That would be worse. If someone outside this room gets their hands on it, they'll use it to complete the sequence. They'll override the ethics core and direct the system to act on doctored intelligence. That's what's happening now. The sheriff turned to the general. Do you have teams on site at Theta 7? The general looked cornered. Not anymore. We lost contact with our last operatives 12 hours ago. Keating's jaw clenched. Then they're already inside. For a moment, the building felt like it might collapse under the gravity of what had just been revealed. Langley turned toward the blinking red light, then back to the men in his station. So we're sitting here with the last man who can stop the end of the world. And no one wants him to do it. Keating stepped forward. That's why I came here. Not to run. Not to hide. But because I need one person who isn't bound by bureaucracy. Someone who still believes in right and wrong without needing to be told which is which. Langley locked eyes with him, and for the first time that night, the lawman in him gave way to something older, deeper, conscience. By the time the rain eased and the wind softened into a low, ominous whistle, Sheriff Langley had made his decision. He locked the precinct doors, dismissed the bewildered deputies, and handed his badge to Isaac without a word. The general protested furiously, demanding chain-of-command adherence, but Langley cut him off with a single sentence. "You've had decades to do the right thing, now I'm doing it for you." Without another glance back, Langley opened the cell, handed Keating his satchel, and asked only one question. "Where is the entrance?" Keating didn't hesitate. 48 miles northeast, up Old Timberline Road. It's under a fake ranger station. We'll need the tape, the ring, and someone who's not afraid to walk into a place built for ghosts. They left in Langley's truck, a nondescript county vehicle with a half-dead radio and a full tank of gas. Darren tried to come along, but Langley told him no. "Someone's got to stay behind to tell the truth if we don't come back." Keating, now suited in a dark, weatherproof jacket from the evidence locker, sat in silence during the ride, watching the road like a soldier in enemy territory. The sun had set completely now, and the headlights carved weak beams through thick fog as they ascended into forested isolation. The deeper they went, the more Keating's posture straightened, his eyes scanning familiar terrain. "It's still active," he muttered once. "I can feel the signal." They arrived at what looked like an abandoned U.S. forestry outpost. Boarded windows, rusted lock, satellite dish long broken. Keating keyed in a sequence on the doorframe. 5 taps, then a pause, then 3. A lock disengaged with a metallic click. Inside, the floor creaked under their boots as they made their way to the back wall. Keating slid aside a cabinet, revealing a narrow tunnel descending deep into the mountain. The walls changed from wood to steel, then to concrete. The air became cold, dry, metallic. Lights flickered to life on motion sensors, revealing a corridor marked by faded red letters. "Lockjaw Protocol Entry, Authorized Only." Langley followed without a word, every step echoing like it could trigger something ancient. At the end of the corridor was a steel blast door with a retinal scanner and fingerprint pad. Keating placed the ring into a recessed socket next to it. The cassette tape was slotted into a nearby player. When he pressed play, a series of tones echoed through the chamber. Low, layered frequencies that didn't even sound human. The scanner lit up. The door opened slowly, revealing a room lined with monitors, control panels, and a single central console glowing pale blue. Keating approached it and paused. "This is it. The core." The screen displayed a series of queries. Threat detection sequences, command line prompts, and countdowns written in code. It was already active. Keating typed rapidly, bypassing several security levels using old call signs and protocol phrases. Finally, the core asked one question: "Is the United States government operational?" Keating didn't answer. Langley stepped forward, voice firm. "Yes, it is. And I am an elected officer of that government. We're here to shut you down." The screen blinked. Then displayed, "Authorization required." Keating turned to Langley. "You'll need to speak into the microphone. Use the phrase, 'Initiate fail-safe sequence Delta 7. That'll tell it you're invoking post-sovereign override authority." Langley took a deep breath and did as instructed. The lights dimmed. The core went silent. Then the screen displayed, "Request accepted. Manual shutdown initiated. Final sequence requires 2 keys." From his satchel, Keating retrieved a long-forgotten key, heavy, engraved, identical to one that had once hung in the Oval Office. Langley reached for the second, retrieved from the evidence locker back at the station. Together, they inserted them, turned them in unison, and waited. The screen blinked once more. "Lockjaw system. Decommissioned. Final report encrypted. Core sealed." Keating sat down slowly, as if a lifetime of weight had just fallen from his shoulders. "It's done," he whispered. "They can't use it anymore. Not without starting from scratch. We bought the country time." Langley looked at him. Was it worth it? Keating didn't smile. "I don't know. But it's over." As they exited the facility, the blast door sealed behind them with a final hiss, like the mountain exhaling secrets it had held too long. They returned to the truck in silence. On the drive back, the radio sprang to life, broadcasting a scrambled emergency signal, undoubtedly triggered when Lockjaw lost contact with its operators. Military response would follow. Investigations. Spin. But the war machine had lost its teeth, at least for now. When they arrived back at the station, Keating refused to enter. "This is where I disappear again," he said. "There's nothing more I can do without putting people in danger." He handed Langley a folded envelope. "If they come asking, give them this. It's the truth, in my handwriting. But only if it's ever needed." The sheriff watched him walk away, his silhouette fading into the mist like a figure in an old war story, half myth, half warning. That night, Langley wrote a letter of resignation. He didn't mail it. He didn't quit. But he left it in his drawer, just in case the day came when doing the right thing needed a paper trail. And on the wall behind his desk, he pinned one photo, copied from the evidence room, the one of Keating beside the president, both saluting with solemn pride. He never saw Keating again. No one did. But sometimes, when the wind picked up just right and the stars aligned in cold silence, Langley thought he heard that tape playing, somewhere far beneath the earth, keeping watch.